Welcome to MarcusG.tv. I am Chef Marcus Giuliano and I'm a chef on a mission. Today's mission is seafood sustainability. I had a comment recently that asked me about Verlasso farm-raised salmon from Chile. And I've heard of it before, but I've never done in-depth research. So I proceeded to scour the website, which looks great. I proceeded to find out that they are also certified as a good alternative for Monterey Bay Aquarium. Now, I've never heard of a farmed salmon that's not an inland contained system. This one is out in the ocean. It's a pen salmon. I've never heard of a salmon that's been certified or been listed as a better choice. So I was really shocked. So I wanted to dive into this, and here's what I found. So first glance at their website looks great. Raising salmon in harmony with nature. Verlasso is a premium salmon raised to promote balance between our needs and the needs of the environment. Maintaining this equilibrium is at the heart of everything we do. We strive to meet the highest standards today, knowing that we must continually improve our practices to maintain balance for the future. Great philosophy, great opening statement, oh yeah. Here's just some mumbo jumbo about the environment and how we need to increase our food supply and the demand. So this is just standard stuff that anybody can really say. Life cycle, hatching, youth, maturity, harvest. So far, it looks like they're doing a really good job, but it's a standard fish farm, and a lot of fish farms have this the smoke and mirrors up there. So, it's a well done website. A website like this from any company would actually trick the average consumer, saying, oh, what's wrong? What could possibly be wrong with this salmon? Here's an image of the actual salmon. It was hard to find an image of the raw salmon. Now, as you can see, this salmon, it has a high fat content. It's going to be fed a diet, and we'll get to the diet because the diet's very interesting on this. But it's a high fat fish. And we know with farmed fish that high fat fish typically have more toxins, more dioxins, PCBs. They do have more omegas typically, but you're trading off that more omegas for a lot more other bad chemicals. So here, it looks like a standard piece of salmon. The big white lines in it, which indicate that that's farmed and has a lot of fat. All right, so here we're looking at the Seafood Watch, and you can see the salmon's going down. Salmon, Alaska, California, Oregon, Fraser River. Salmon Atlantic farmed is worldwide avoid. You see that in red down there as you go down the list. And right under that, the third one from the bottom is Salmon Atlantic Verlasso, good alternative. Interesting. So let's click that link and see what happens. Consumer note, the majority of salmon farmed today are Atlantic salmon. A small quantity of Pacific salmon, Chinook and coho, are also farmed. This recommendation only applies to farmed Atlantic salmon from Verlasso, farmed in net pens in Chile. So, here's the deal. Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch typically has not done specific farms in the past. Now they have a program where a farm can specifically apply to the program and get audited, which they have to pay for. They have to cover the costs from Monterey Bay Aquarium. The farm has to cover the cost, and Monterey Bay Aquarium will send a third party in and inspect the farm. So, that's exactly what happened here. Summary. Verlasso is a proprietary brand of aqua chili, which is the largest producer of farmed salmon in Chile. Chile is one of the world's largest salmon producing countries. Verlasso uses a genetically modified yeast as feed ingredient, thereby reducing its reliance upon fish meal and fish oil from wild fish. Now this is key right here. So this is a major factor in determining Verlasso's sustainability. Typically the issue with farmed salmon in general, the industry in general with salmon, it takes 2 to 3 pounds of wild harvested fish, okay, to make 1 pound of edible salmon. 1 pound of salmon, 2 to 3 pounds of feed to make that 1 pound. So you're at a net loss of protein. And of course, the reason why you would raise fish is to increase the world's food supply, correct? So this is why one of the reasons salmon has such a bad rap. It takes more resources than it produces. That's like saying, let me take 3 gallons of gasoline and put it in this machine, and I'll come out with 1 gallon of gasoline. Right? This is essentially what's happening. So this is why farm salmon is not sustainable to begin with. So Verlasso, if you read this very carefully, check this out again. Verlasso uses a genetically modified yeast as a feed ingredient, thereby reducing its reliance on fish meal and fish oil from wild fish. So the fish is being fed a genetically modified yeast. Okay, it's being grown in a lab. It's not real food, it's being modified. So Monterey Bay Aquarium now says, wow, they're not using wild fish. They're not depleting wild stocks to make salmon. Now, as a consumer, do you want to eat genetically modified yeast? I personally don't. I wouldn't want anything I'm eating to do that. I mean, the big thing now is people are so anti-cloning, anti-GMOs, and this is just pushing this thing further in that direction by saying we're going to certify, not certify, but we're going to make, say, you're a better choice because you're doing this practice as opposed. So it's really not, when Monterey Bay Aquarium's looking at this, they're not analyzing, is this yeast safe? Is it causing damage? What's happening? Is this yeast getting out into the wild populations of fish? I mean, there's a lot of questions here that could be unanswered because, of course, you feed fish in pens, they have holes in them, that goes into the ocean. So what are the long-term effects of this genetically modified yeast to the fish, to us for eating the fish? Okay, can it cause tumors in fish? Are there long-term cattle? You know, cattle lives 10, 15, 20 years, and we're harvesting cattle at 18 months old. So are they giving the fish enough maturity to actually develop tumors, to develop cancers, if that is the route that this food is going to take it? I mean, what would happen if we started eating genetically modified yeast as our main source of protein year after year after year? I mean, would we come up with diseases, tumors, cancer, degenerative problems, kidney problems? I think these are questions that are probably unanswered. So, as a consumer, I'd be very wary about that. It says these salmon are farmed at lower densities than the typical industry standards. I'm not sure what that exactly means. But when I did speak to Monterey Bay Aquarium, they said they are significantly lower densities. The more you pack fish together, the more you pack cattle together, the more you pack anything together, the more disease. The more you pack people in a room, right? You spread germs, and one germ, it just keeps going around the room, right? Well, that's what happens in salmon farms. They keep going around the salmon farms and produces tons of disease. So once that disease is out there, all the fish get it, and then it goes into the wild population of fish. Now, these salmon are set up where there's not wild salmon runs, but the problem in British Columbia and other places on the east, especially on the East Coast in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, they set these salmon farms up that are spreading disease in the direct path of wild salmon. So the baby wild salmon, after they spawn out of the river, when they're very fragile, swimming downstream and into the ocean, they swim right through these farms, and that's when the lice and the other disease attach to them. So they're not in this part of the world where this is happening, so that could be a good thing for their sustainability rating. But here's what Monterey says to further justify the good alternative rating. The salmon are farmed at lower densities than the typical industry standards. And while chemical use is lower than the norm in Chile, antibiotic and pesticide use for Verlasso remains a high concern. So they're still using pesticides, they're still using antibiotics, that this is still getting employed. So don't think you're buying an antibiotic-free fish. Don't think you're buying something that's free of pesticides or free of chemicals. That's not the case here. They're getting two major nods is what they're getting. They're getting a nod from Monterey Bay Aquarium for not using wild populated wild fish. So they're using genetically modified yeast protein, and they're getting a nod from them for using lower densities. But they're still admitting here that there's antibiotic use, a high concern for antibiotic use, and pesticide use. So these are the issues that I have with Verlasso salmon. It's just my personal critique, my personal concerns. It's why I wouldn't serve this farm salmon. It looks great on the website. It looks great on Monterey Bay Aquarium. But the rest of the story is, what is the rest of the story? What are the yeast? What is this yeast protein? How's it being derived? What's in it? What are the long-term effects? What is the lower density? Of course, you can find the lower density, but that's what they're getting their nods for. This is what elevated them to a good alternative. Now, they are the only farm salmon right now that has that status as far as net raised salmon. And it costs money to do this, so it might be prohibitive for smaller inland contained systems to do this. Smaller, like Sweet Springs, that has a phenomenal farm in Washington State, and it does coho salmon. So it might be cost prohibitive for a small farm like that to do this, because I'm sure this is a big deal to get this certified. And they are a part of a large salmon farm company. Okay, they have a large parent company, so they have money to do this and be able to research and make this kind of yeast, this kind of food. Probably took a lot of money as well. So this salmon is probably not cheap, is what my guess is. So if you have a choice of wild salmon, I would go for the wild salmon. If this is your only choice for farm salmon, personally, I don't know enough to consume it or to be able to serve it. I don't personally consume fish on a regular basis, but if I were to serve this in my restaurant, I don't have enough information or long-term studies. Maybe if I dove into this more, maybe that does exist, but how long-term are we actually talking? So it's just like GMOs. There's no long-term GMO study that says GMOs is safe for human consumption. They don't exist. It's not out there. There's all these short-term studies. So while it may be a good alternative, it's not going to be my alternative for my restaurant and for my guests. So those are my personal critiques on Verlasso salmon. Hope you enjoyed this video, this insightful video. If you did like this video, please hit like, subscribe to my channel, spread the word, and let's know what we're eating. Eat real food. Chef Marcus Giuliano, thanks for watching.